Life has a way of writing stories more extraordinary than fiction. On a weathered dock in Newport, Rhode Island, Marcus Sullivan spends his days fixing boats to support his young daughter. When a magnificent but neglected yacht mysteriously appears at the marina, he sees beyond its faded glory to the masterpiece beneath. Working tirelessly, he restores the vessel to its former splendor, never imagining how this act of dedication will change his life forever. But why did the yacht's enigmatic owner, one of America's wealthiest women, disappear for months only to return now? And what made her choose this humble dock of all places to moor her father's prized possession? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn sunrise painted Newport's morning sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold, filtering through the salt-crusted windows of the small apartment above Harborview Marina's office. Marcus Sullivan's calloused fingers moved with surprising gentleness as he folded a perfectly crisp grilled cheese sandwich into Sarah's favorite lunch container, the one with dancing dolphins that he'd found at a yard sale last summer. "Daddy, is my card still in your toolbox?" Sarah's voice drifted from the tiny bathroom where she was wrestling with her untamed brown curls, so much like her mother's had been. "Right where you put it, sweetheart." Marcus smiled, touching the breast pocket of his worn work shirt, where he actually kept her birthday card. The crayon-drawn hearts and careful inscription, "To the best daddy and boat doctor ever," had become his daily reminder of why every long hour mattered. Their morning routine flowed like a well-rehearsed dance in the cramped kitchen. 8 years of it being just the two of them had taught them the steps by heart. Sarah knew to grab the orange juice while Marcus reached for her favorite chipped blue mug, their arms crossing in practiced coordination. "Remember Mrs. Peterson's picking you up for study group today?" Marcus reminded her, watching as she spread peanut butter on her toast, with the focused determination of an 8-year-old, intent on proving her independence. "I've got that big engine repair on the Petersons' fishing boat. Can I come help after?" Sarah's eyes lit up with hope. She'd inherited more than just his dark hair. That fascination with boats and engines was pure Sullivan. Marcus checked their ancient refrigerator calendar, held up by marina-themed magnets. "If you finish your homework first, those multiplication tables aren't going to learn themselves. But Daddy, real mechanics need math too, right?" She grinned, revealing the gap where her front tooth had recently departed. "That's my girl." He ruffled her hair, earning a playful protest. "Using the old Sullivan logic against me." The morning light caught the worn edges of their lives, the second-hand furniture, the carefully mended curtains, the stack of boat repair manuals borrowed from the library. But it also illuminated the treasures, Sarah's art projects, proudly displayed on every available surface, photographs of their weekend adventures on the shore, the small model boat they were building together piece by piece. Marcus's eyes drifted to the window overlooking the marina. The early morning mist was lifting, revealing the forest of masts and the promise of another day of honest work. He'd learned long ago that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in moments like these. His daughter's laughter, the satisfaction of fixing what others thought broken, the salty air that carried possibilities on every breeze. "Ready for inspection, Captain." Sarah stood at attention, backpack properly zipped, shoes tied, though slightly uneven, and her attempt at a ponytail looking remarkably seaworthy. "First Mate Sullivan, you pass with flying colors." He saluted, then knelt to adjust her collar. "Remember what Grandpa always said? A Sullivan never leaves port without checking all the rigging," they recited together, sharing the private joke that had become their morning motto. As Sarah skipped down the worn wooden steps to meet her carpool, Marcus watched from the landing, his heart full. The morning sun caught her backpack's reflective stripe, making it flash like a beacon. She turned at the bottom, waving with her whole body the way only children can. "Love you to the horizon and back," she called out, their special saying carrying across the quiet marina. "And all the way around the world," he answered, as he did every morning, watching until Mrs. Peterson's sensible sedan disappeared around the corner. Marcus lingered a moment longer, breathing in the morning calm before the marina came to life. Below, the first early birds were already arriving. Commercial fishermen preparing for their day, retirees eager to catch the morning tide. They nodded up at him with the easy familiarity of the working waterfront, where everyone's business was somehow connected to the rhythm of the tides and the health of their vessels. In the distance, a foghorn sounded its low, mournful note. Time to begin another day of bringing broken things back to life. Marcus descended the stairs to his workshop, Sarah's card secure against his heart, ready to face whatever challenges the sea might send his way. The morning fog had burned away by the time Marcus made his way down the dock, his toolbox swaying gently with each step on the weathered planks. The familiar creaks and groans of wood against water provided a symphony he'd known since childhood, when his father had first taught him the difference between a carburetor and a fuel injection system. Old Joe Fletcher was already settled in his usual spot, perched on an overturned bucket near his beloved Sea Witch, a sturdy trawler that had seen better days. His pipe smoke curled lazily in the morning air. "Morning, Sullivan. Hear that clicking in my port engine? Started up yesterday afternoon." Marcus paused, cocking his head to listen as Joe fired up the engine. 20 years of experience had taught him to trust his ears as much as his eyes. "Sounds like a loose rocker arm, Joe. I can take a look after I finish with the Petersons' boat." "No rush," Joe waved his pipe dismissively. "Unlike some of these weekend warriors, I know good work takes time." He gestured toward the far end of the marina, where gleaming luxury vessels stood in stark contrast to the working boats. The marina had always been this way, a meeting point between two worlds. The eastern docks housed the commercial fleet, weathered fishing boats, modest sailboats, and well-used cabin cruisers. The western side catered to summer people, their expensive yachts gleaming with polish and privilege. Marcus worked on them, all earning a reputation for being the man who could fix anything that floated. He made his way to the Petersons' fishing boat, exchanging greetings with the regulars. There was Mary Chen, methodically checking her bait shop inventory. Tom Watson, the retired high school teacher who taught sailing to local kids, and the Suarez brothers arguing good-naturedly as they loaded their lobster boat. "The miracle worker arrives," Roberto Suarez called out. "Hey, Marcus. When you're done with the Petersons, our hauler's acting up again." "Add it to his list," his brother Miguel laughed. "Right behind my depth sounder and half the marina's engines." Marcus smiled, pulling out his worn notebook. Another habit inherited from his father. "Stop by the office later, we'll figure something out." He'd learned early that in a working marina, goodwill was its own kind of currency. Sometimes a repair bill got paid in fresh lobsters or a weekend's catch, and that was just fine by him. The morning proceeded with its usual rhythm until something caught his eye, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. At the far end of the commercial dock, a vessel he'd never seen before rode low in the water. Even from a distance, Marcus could tell this was no ordinary boat. Curiosity drew him closer after finishing with the Petersons' engine. The yacht must have arrived in the night, explaining why he hadn't noticed it earlier. Despite layers of salt and neglect, her lines were magnificent. Classic rather than modern, speaking of an era when boats were built to both work and inspire. "Quite a sight, isn't she?" Mary had appeared beside him carrying a box of tackles. "Showed up around midnight. No crew, just some lawyer type with papers for the office." Very hush-hush. Marcus approached the vessel slowly, his trained eye catching details others might miss. She was easily 60 feet, her once gleaming hull now dulled by time and elements. The brass fittings had turned green with verdigris, and the teak decking showed signs of serious neglect. But underneath the worn exterior, he could sense the bones of something extraordinary. A movement caught his attention. A slight list to port, followed by the unmistakable sound of a bilge pump struggling. Marcus frowned. That wasn't good. The lawyer might have dropped off papers, but a boat like this shouldn't be left alone if she was taking on water. He climbed aboard carefully, his footsteps echoing on the empty deck. The registration name had been recently covered, but he could make out the ghost of letters beneath, Catherine's Dream. Something about the name tugged at his memory, but he couldn't quite place it. The helm was locked, but through the windows, he could see the rich mahogany interior, now dulled by dust and disuse. This wasn't just a boat. It was a piece of maritime history, the kind of vessel that had stories to tell. The bilge pump sounded again, more labored this time. Marcus checked his watch. The Suarez brothers could wait a bit longer. Something about this neglected beauty called to him the same way abandoned dogs called to soft-hearted children. He had to at least check that she wasn't in danger of sinking. As he made his way below to investigate the pump, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into something bigger than a simple repair job. The yacht seemed to be waiting for something or someone, and fate had placed him here at exactly this moment. He pulled out his flashlight and his father's old repair manual, its pages dog-eared and annotated with decades of accumulated wisdom. Whatever secrets this boat held, whatever story had brought her to his dock, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let such a magnificent vessel suffer one more day of neglect. Not while he had tools in his hands and knowledge in his head. "Well, old girl," he muttered, patting the bulkhead, "let's see what stories you have to tell." The yacht's engine room told a story of grandeur fallen into decline. Marcus's flashlight beam revealed gleaming brass and copper beneath years of tarnish, like buried treasure waiting to be rediscovered. The main engine, a classic Rolls-Royce, marine diesel, sat silent and proud, despite the neglect evident in its seized joints and corroded fittings. "Now what brought you to this state?" he murmured, running his hand along the massive engine block. The bilge pump's labored rhythm echoed through the space, but it wasn't the only sound that caught his attention. There was a deeper problem here. The subtle whisper of water finding its way where it shouldn't. In the beam of his flashlight, a leather-bound logbook caught his eye, wedged behind a shelf of spare parts. The cover was water-stained, but still legible. Catherine's Dream, property of James Thompson. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. Thompson, as in Thompson Maritime Industries, the shipping empire that had helped build Newport's golden age. He carefully opened the logbook, its pages crackling with age. The handwritten entries spoke of voyages along the eastern seaboard, fishing expeditions with his daughter Catherine, detailed maintenance records kept with meticulous care. The last entry was dated 5 years ago. "Engine running rough. Catherine says I should let the yard handle it, but a man should know his own boat. Some things you need to fix yourself." A newspaper clipping fell from between the pages, yellowed but preserved. The headline struck him like a physical blow. "Maritime mogul James Thompson, lost at sea." The article detailed how the legendary businessman had disappeared during a solo voyage, his body never found. The yacht had been discovered drifting empty, its engine seized from what investigators called catastrophic mechanical failure. Marcus sat heavily on a nearby toolbox, the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just any abandoned yacht. This was the vessel that had sparked one of Newport's greatest mysteries. The article mentioned Thompson's only daughter, Catherine, who'd inherited the business, but had become increasingly reclusive after her father's death. The persistent drip of water drew him back to the present. The bilge pump was fighting a losing battle against a leaking shaft seal, a relatively simple fix, but one that could sink a boat if left unchecked. Marcus knew he should wait for official authorization, for someone from the Thompson estate, to make proper arrangements, but James Thompson's words echoed in his mind. Some things you need to fix yourself. Looking around the engine room, Marcus saw more than just mechanical problems. He saw a daughter's grief preserved in neglect, a father's legacy slowly drowning in salt water and time. From his toolbox, he pulled out his own logbook, a simple composition notebook where he recorded every repair, every modification, every lesson learned the hard way. Sarah had decorated its cover with stickers and her careful handwriting. Daddy's Boat Hospital Records. "Well, Mr. Thompson," he said to the empty engine room, "let's see if we can't honor your craftsmanship." He began a methodical inspection, documenting every issue he found. The engine's timing was off, freeze plugs were corroded, fuel lines needed replacing, but the bones were strong. This was a vessel built to last generations, not just seasons. A soft thud from above made him start. But it was only the gentle sound of the yacht settling against her fenders, rocking in the wake of a passing fishing boat. Still, something about the sound made the hair on his neck stand up. The yacht felt alive somehow, as if she'd been waiting for someone to care again. Marcus checked his watch. Nearly noon. He needed to check on the Suarez brothers' hauler, return 3 calls about winter storage, and pick up parts for the Petersons' boat. The responsible thing would be to close up the yacht and wait for proper authorization. Instead, he found himself writing in his logbook, Day 1, initial inspection of Catherine's Dream. Engine seized but salvageable. Hull sound. Primary concerns. Shaft seal, fuel system, general corrosion. He paused, then added, "She deserves better than this." Climbing back to the deck, Marcus secured the engine room hatch. The autumn sun had burned away the morning mist, and the yacht's neglected brightwork seemed to plead for attention. He made a mental list of what he'd need. Penetrating oil for the seized engine, marine grease, fuel system cleaner, a case of metal polish, and more hours than he probably had to give. But looking back at the silent helm, he couldn't shake the feeling that this yacht had found its way to his dock for a reason. Sometimes the things most in need of repair weren't just engines and hull plates, but the stories and memories wrapped up in wood, steel, and salt water. He patted the gunwale as he stepped back onto the dock. "Don't worry, old girl. We'll get you running again." The promise felt bigger than just mechanical repairs, but Marcus had learned long ago that the most important promises often did. Dawn painted the harbour in shades of pearl when Marcus returned to Catherine's Dream the next morning. He'd spent half the night studying his father's old repair manuals, particularly the chapter on Rolls-Royce marine diesels. The pages were filled with his father's cramped handwriting, "Always check the timing chain before the valves," and "Oil pressure tells the truth if you know how to listen." He'd laid out his tools with surgical precision on a clean white towel, another lesson from his father. A professional's tools should look professional, he'd always said. The memory brought a smile as Marcus caught his reflection in a tarnished, brass fitting. He was wearing his father's old canvas work jacket, the one with Sullivan & Son Marine Repair embroidered on the breast pocket, though the shop had closed long before Marcus could officially become the Son part of the business. First task was the leaking shaft seal. He'd managed to source the parts through old Eddie at the chandlery, who'd raised an eyebrow at the specifications but asked no questions. The work was methodical, peaceful in the early morning quiet. Each turn of a wrench, each careful measurement, felt like a conversation with the past, both his own and the vessel's. "Daddy!" Sarah's voice echoed across the deck above. "Mrs. Peterson said you were already here." "Down in the engine room, sweetheart. Remember the rules. Never come below without permission, always wear my safety vest, and keep one hand for the boat and one for myself," she recited, carefully making her way down the steps. She was wearing her own canvas work jacket, a birthday gift he'd had made at the surplus store, with Sullivan and Daughter Marine Repair embroidered in matching style to his own. "What do you think of her?" Marcus asked, watching Sarah take in the massive engine room with wide eyes. "She's sad," Sarah said simply, running a small hand along a brass rail, "like she misses somebody." Marcus paused in his work, struck by his daughter's perception. "You might be right about that. Want to help her feel better?" Sarah's face lit up. She loved their restoration projects, had been his assistant since she was old enough to hold a wrench. From his toolbox, she pulled out her own logbook, a pink spiral notebook with Sarah's boat hospital helper notes written carefully on the cover. "What should I write first?" she asked, pencil poised. "Date, time, and weather conditions," Marcus replied, just as his father had taught him. "Then we list what we're fixing and what tools we need." They worked together through the morning, Sarah proving to be an excellent assistant at cleaning and polishing, while Marcus tackled the technical repairs. She had an eye for detail that amazed him, spotting things he might have missed. "Look, Daddy," she called out, pointing to a section of bulkhead. "There are marks here, like someone was measuring how tall they got." Marcus brought his flashlight. Closer. Sure enough, there were faded pencil marks on the white paint, with dates going back years. The highest mark was labelled Catherine, 16th birthday. "This was a family boat," he explained softly. "A father and daughter used to spend a lot of time here together, like us with our boats," something like that. He ran his fingers over the height marks, thinking of James Thompson teaching his daughter about engines and tides, just as he was teaching Sarah. But they lost each other. Sarah was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then she wrapped her arms around his waist in a tight hug. "We won't ever lose each other, right, Daddy?" "Never," he promised, hugging her back. "We're Sullivans. We stick together like barnacles," she finished with a giggle, their old joke bringing smiles to both their faces. They worked until the afternoon light began to fade, making more progress than Marcus had expected. The shaft seal was fixed, the bilge was dry, and they'd begun the long process of cleaning years of grime from the brass and copper. Sarah had discovered a small galley cabinet filled with old charts, and had carefully laid them out to dry, handling the weathered paper with surprising gentleness. "Look, they drew all over them," she said, pointing to handwritten notes in the margins. "This one says, 'Best blues fishing, Kay's first catch.'" Marcus studied the charts, noting how they told the story of a father and daughter exploring the coast together, each notation a memory preserved in ink and paper. He thought of his own charts, marked with spots where Sarah had first learned to steer a dinghy or where they'd found their secret beach for picnics. As they packed up their tools for the day, the setting sun streamed through the portholes, catching the newly polished brass and making it glow like honey. Sarah stepped back, admiring their work. "She's not as sad anymore," she declared, "just a little bit lonely." Marcus looked around the engine room, at the progress they'd made, and the work still ahead. The yacht did feel different, more alive somehow, as if their care had awakened, something that had been sleeping for a long time. "Well," he said, helping Sarah gather her things, "we'll just have to keep coming back until she's not lonely at all." They made their way up to the deck, where the evening air carried the scent of approaching autumn. Sarah paused at the rail, looking out over the harbour where lights were beginning to twinkle on other boats. "Daddy, do you think the people who used to love her know we're taking care of her now?" Marcus thought of James Thompson's last logbook, entry of Catherine somewhere out there, perhaps still grieving, of boats and fathers and daughters, and all the ways love gets passed along. "I think," he said carefully, "that when you love something enough, you can feel it being loved, even when you're far away." Sarah nodded, satisfied with this answer, in the way that children sometimes are when adults stumble upon an accidental truth. They walked down the dock together, their matching jackets glowing in the sunset, leaving behind a yacht that somehow seemed to sit a little prouder in the water than it had that morning. The Rolls-Royce Marine Diesel loomed before Marcus like a sleeping giant, its massive frame filling the engine room with both promise and challenge. 3 days into the restoration, he'd finally managed to free the seized crankshaft, working. by battery lamp well into the night after Sarah had gone to bed at their neighbor's house. "Come on, old girl," he murmured, carefully turning the engine over by hand. The resistance told its own story, scoring in the cylinders, years of sitting idle, seawater corruption in places where only fresh water should have lived. But underneath, the damage, he could feel the precision engineering that had made these engines legendary. A flash of white caught his eye behind the engine block. Reaching deep into the cramped space, his fingers found a photograph that had slipped between the frame and the bulkhead. He withdrew it carefully, mindful of its age. The image showed a younger James Thompson, sleeves rolled up, teaching a teenage Catherine how to adjust the engine timing. Their expressions mirrored each other, the same focused concentration, the same slight furrow between their brows, written on the back in faded ink, Katie's first engine lesson, spring 1999. Marcus propped the photo on his toolbox, letting it guide his work like a silent instructor. The engine's problems were complex. Frozen, injector pumps, corroded cooling passages, stripped threads in vital places. But with each problem he solved, he felt closer to understanding what had happened on James Thompson's final voyage. The timing chain showed unusual wear, confirming his suspicions about the engine's last moments. He could almost see it. Thompson, alone at sea, hearing the first warnings of mechanical failure, a man who prided himself on fixing things, trying to solve one last problem as the engine died beneath his hands. "You did everything you could," Marcus said to the photo, to the ghost of a man who'd loved his daughter and his boat with equal passion. "Sometimes things break in ways we can't fix alone." The night deepened around him. The only sounds, the lap of water against the hull and the occasional creak of timber. He'd developed a routine over the past few days. Start at the marina at dawn, handle his regular clients until afternoon, then work on Catherine's dream until his hands shook with fatigue. The engine was teaching him patience. Each frozen bolt required careful heating. Each corroded fitting needed gentle persuasion rather than force. His father had taught him this approach. Boats respond to love, not anger, same as people. Around midnight, he discovered the heart of the problem, a hairline crack in the timing case, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. It would have allowed seawater to seep in gradually, leading to the catastrophic failure that had stranded Thompson at sea. The repair would require innovation. The part hadn't been manufactured in decades, and custom machining would cost more than most boats were worth, but Marcus had learned long ago that impossibilities were often just puzzles waiting for the right solution. He pulled out his father's old notebook, flipping to a section about alternative repair techniques. There in the margins was a sketch of a similar repair his father had once attempted, using a combination of epoxy and copper backing plates. It wasn't in any manual, wasn't by the book, but sometimes the best solutions came from experience. Rather than expertise, working with painstaking precision, Marcus cleaned the crack with acetone, prepared the surfaces, and began the delicate process of repair. Each step had to be perfect. This wasn't just about fixing an engine anymore. It was about honoring 3 generations of fathers who'd passed down their knowledge, about proving that some things worth saving could be saved. Hours blended together as he worked. The night air grew heavy with the scent of metal and oil and possibility. Somewhere above, the moon crossed the sky, its light filtering through the portholes to make patterns on the engine room walls. Near dawn, he made the final adjustments. The repair wasn't pretty, but it was strong, stronger perhaps than the original design. He'd reinforced the weak point that had led to the original failure, adding a small drain port that would prevent future water accumulation. Exhausted, but unwilling to stop, Marcus began the process of reassembly. Each part went back together with fresh gaskets and seals, each connection cleaned and protected against the cruel chemistry of salt air and time. As he worked, he thought about Catherine Thompson, wondering if she knew how hard her father had. Tried to keep his beloved boat running. Did she blame the boat for his loss? Or did she, like Marcus, understand that sometimes love means fighting against entropy itself, trying to keep the things we care about from slipping away? The first light of dawn was turning the portholes pink when Marcus finally stepped back, his hands stained with grease, his back aching from hours in cramped spaces. The engine stood ready, restored not just to working condition, but to something, approaching its original glory. He touched the photograph one last time, before carefully placing it in his wallet, next to Sarah's latest school picture. 2 fathers, 2 daughters, separated by time and circumstance, but connected by something deeper than mere mechanics. Tomorrow, he would test the engine. Tomorrow, he would know if his solution had worked. But for now, in the quiet of early morning, he simply stood in the presence of what he'd accomplished, letting the peaceful breathing of the boat remind him that some things, once loved, never truly stop running. The morning fog rolled thick across the marina, turning familiar shapes into ghostly silhouettes. Marcus sat in Mary Chen's bait shop, warming his hands around a cup of coffee while she sorted through her morning newspaper delivery. The small shop had become an unofficial gathering place for the marina's early risers, a place where fish tales and local histories mingled with the scent of coffee and salt air. Thompson Maritime stock jumped again yesterday, Mary commented, folding the business section with deliberate care. 3rd time this month. Catherine Thompson may be a recluse, but she sure knows how to run her father's company. Old Joe Fletcher snorted from his perch by the window. Knows how to run it into the ground, you mean? James Thompson built that empire by knowing every captain's name, walking every dock. When's the last time anyone saw his daughter down here among the working boats? Leave it be, Joe, Marcus said quietly. But Mary was already pulling out the wooden box she kept beneath the counter, her personal archive of newspaper clippings and marina history. You've been working on that yacht for a week now, Marcus. You should know the story. She spread out a yellowed article from 5 years ago. The photograph showed Catherine Thompson accepting an industry award, her smile professional, but her eyes distant. She was different before her father died. Used to be down here all the time, learning the business from the bottom up. Marcus studied the photograph. Catherine would have been in her early 30s then, dressed in business attire but with a mechanic's watch on her wrist, the kind that could take a beating in an engine room. It was a detail that spoke volumes. I remember her, Tom Watson offered from where he was repairing a fishing net. She had a way with the old salts, spoke their language, could talk about displacement and draft like she was born to it. After James disappeared, he shook his head, something in her disappeared too. The shop fell quiet, only the distant cry of seagulls breaking the silence. Marcus thought about the height marks in the yacht's engine room, the careful notations on old charts, a childhood measured in nautical miles and engine grease. Mary pulled out another clipping, a society page from 3 years ago. Last public appearance, some charity gala in Newport. After that, she started running everything through lawyers and managers. Lives up in that big house on the point, they say. The one with the private dock that hasn't seen a boat since James died. Can't say I blame her, Marcus found himself saying. Losing your father that way, knowing it was his love of the sea that took him. He thought of Sarah, of teaching her the same skills his father had taught him. Every parent who loved. The water lived with that whisper of fear. Still, Joe persisted, letting that beautiful yacht rot away. James Thompson would have never, sometimes, Marcus interrupted more sharply than he'd intended, taking care of the things that remind you of loss takes more courage than letting them go. He was thinking of his own father's tools, how they'd sat untouched for months after the funeral, before he'd found the strength to use them again. The fog was beginning to lift outside, revealing the sleek lines of Catherine's dream at the end of the dock. From this distance, you could almost imagine her in her glory days, cutting through waves with father and daughter at the helm. "She's had offers for the yacht, you know," Mary said softly, putting away her box of memories. "Could have sold it a dozen times over, but she keeps paying the registration, keeps it insured, like she's waiting for something." Marcus thought about the engine he'd spent nights repairing, about the innovations he'd made to prevent the same failure that had taken James Thompson's life. Maybe she's waiting for someone to understand it wasn't the boat's fault, or her father's, or hers. The others fell silent, perhaps hearing in his words an echo of their own losses, their own understanding of how grief could anchor a heart as surely as any storm. The morning light was strengthening now, burning away the fog to reveal the day ahead. Marcus stood, leaving his coffee half-finished. There was work to be done, and somewhere in the process of restoration, he felt he was doing more than just fixing a boat. He was keeping faith with all those who'd ever loved something enough to try to save it. "The Yard's got her story wrong," he said simply, heading for the door. "She's not abandoned. She's just waiting to come home." Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp, the kind of autumn day that made the harbour water sparkle like scattered diamonds. Sarah had been up since sunrise, organising her boat cleaning kit with the methodical precision of an 8-year-old. On a mission, her purple bucket contained carefully labelled bottles of polish, soft rags arranged by size, and her prized possession, a brass cleaning formula she'd helped Marcus develop using lemon juice and other secret ingredients. "Ready for inspection, First Mate Sullivan?" Marcus asked, watching her double-check her supplies on their small kitchen table. She straightened, giving him her most serious nod. "I made a schedule, Daddy." She held up a sheet of paper covered in her careful handwriting, complete with color-coded sections and small drawings in the margins. "The brass needs doing first because the morning sun helps it shine better." Marcus felt his heart swell. She'd been paying attention all these years, absorbing not just the what of boat maintenance, but the why. "That's my girl. What else?" "Then we do the woodwork while it's still cool, because hot sun makes the oil get sticky." She ran her finger down her list. "And I found something in Grandpa's book about cleaning the gauges with special cloths so we don't scratch them." They walked down to the dock together, Sarah clutching her bucket while Marcus carried their lunch cooler. Catherine's dream waited at her berth, the morning light catching the areas they'd already restored. In just 2 weeks, the yacht had begun to show glimpses of her former glory. "Look!" Sarah rushed ahead, pointing to where she'd polished the brass bell yesterday. A family of sparrows had built a nest in the radar arch above it, and the bell gleamed beneath them like a golden guardian. "They chose our boat." "They know quality work when they see it," Marcus said, helping her aboard. He'd noticed how Sarah had started calling it our boat, speaking of Catherine's dream with the same proprietary pride she showed toward the model boats they built together. They settled into their weekend routine, Sarah taking charge of the bright work, while Marcus tackled the more technical tasks. She had created her own job title, Restoration Quality Supervisor, and took it very seriously, making notes in her logbook about every spot that needed attention. "Daddy!" she called from where she was polishing a handrail. "Was Catherine my age when she started learning about boats?" Marcus paused in his work on the helm instruments. "According to the height marks we found, she was probably around 10 when she started spending a lot of time aboard. Why do you ask?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, buffing the brass with slow, careful strokes. "I was thinking about her, about not having her boat anymore. If I couldn't come help you with boats, I'd be really sad." The simple truth in her words caught Marcus off guard. He looked at his daughter, seeing not just the child she was, but the woman she would become. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "when people lose someone they love, the things that remind them of that person become hard to face. But the memories are still good ones, right?" Sarah moved to the next section of rail. "Like how I love using Grandpa's tools because they make me feel like he's helping us?" Marcus smiled, remembering how she'd cried when she first got her own set of miniature wrenches, declaring that now she could be just like Grandpa. "That's right, sweetheart, and maybe someday Catherine will remember that too." They worked through the morning, Sarah humming old sea shanties she'd learned from the fishermen. Around noon, she declared it time for their packed lunch, setting up their picnic spot on the foredeck with the precision of a ship's steward. "I made a discovery," she announced, pulling out her logbook as they ate their sandwiches. "Want to... You see?" She led Marcus to the main salon, pointing to what looked like an ordinary panel in the wooden ceiling. "But look!" Standing on tiptoe, she pressed a hidden catch, and a small compartment swung open. Inside was a child's treasure trove, old candy wrappers, a collection of shells, and a fabric dolphin worn soft with age. Catherine's secret hiding place, Marcus realized, helping Sarah carefully document their find in her logbook. "Can we clean it but leave everything inside?" Sarah asked. "So when she comes back, she'll know we took care of her special things too." Marcus looked at his daughter, this child who understood instinctively what so many adults forgot, that healing sometimes meant preserving the past while making space for the future. "That's exactly what we'll do," he agreed. "And we'll add a note to your logbook about where we found it so we never forget." They spent the afternoon on their respective tasks, Sarah moving through the boat with her cleaning supplies and her ever-present notebook, Marcus working on the complex network of electronics at the helm. But every so often he'd catch her pausing at Catherine's height marks or running her hands along the worn spots on the rails where other small hands had once held on in rough seas. As the sun began to set, Sarah made one final entry in her logbook. Marcus glanced over her shoulder, smiling at the carefully printed words. "Day 14 of restoration. Boat is getting happier. Found secret treasure spot. Sparrows think it's home now. Maybe Catherine will too." Out in the harbour, a bell buoy rang, its endless patient notes marking time like a maritime metronome. Sarah closed her logbook and leaned against her father, both of them watching the light fade from the sky. "We're not just fixing the boat, are we, Daddy?" Marcus hugged her close, thinking of all the layers of healing happening aboard Catherine's dream. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes fixing things means more than just making them work again. Like how you always say love is the best tool in the box." "Exactly like that," he whispered, holding his daughter as the first stars began to appear above the masthead. The interior of Catherine's dream was a time capsule of mahogany and brass, every cabinet and corner holding whispers of its past life. Marcus stood in the main salon, unrolling a set of original interior plans he'd discovered tucked behind a loose panel. The paper was yellowed, but the drawings were precise, showing the loving detail that had gone into the yacht's creation. "Master suite with private study," he read, fingers tracing the elegant architectural lines. "Custom library shelving, integrated navigation station." The plans revealed the boat as she was meant to be. Not just a vessel, but a floating home designed for a father and daughter who loved the sea. The sound of Sarah's footsteps on the companionway stairs broke his concentration. "Daddy, look what I found in the linen closet." She carefully carried a leather-bound album, its pages thick with photographs. They sat together on the salon's built-in settee, the afternoon light streaming through newly cleaned ports. The album's first page bore an inscription. "For Katie, so you'll always remember our adventures. Love, Dad." The photographs told the story of Catherine Thompson growing up aboard. Here she was, as a toddler, helping to steer while perched on her father's lap. There she stood proudly beside her first caught fish, gap-toothed and grinning. Page after page showed father and daughter exploring coves, working on the engine, sharing sunset dinners in the very salon where Marcus and Sarah now sat. "She looks happy," Sarah observed, studying a photo of teenage Catherine learning to navigate. "Like how I feel when we work on boats together." Marcus nodded, understanding. Now why the yacht's neglect felt so wrong. This wasn't just a luxury vessel. It was the physical embodiment of a relationship, a childhood, a love story between father and daughter. They spent the afternoon bringing the salon back to life. Sarah attacked the brass cabinet handles with her special polish, while Marcus repaired the intricate inlaid compass rose in the dining table. Each piece they restored seemed to brighten the whole space, as if the boat itself was awakening from a long sleep. The library shelves held an eclectic collection of books, navigation manuals sharing space with adventure novels and collections of sea poetry. Marcus found himself reading titles aloud: Moby Dick, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, The Old Man and the Sea. "Look at this one, Daddy." Sarah pulled out a slim volume, its cover embossed with silver waves. Inside were handwritten poems about the sea, composed by James Thompson for his daughter. The dedication read, "For Catherine, who taught me that the greatest adventures are the ones we share." They worked their way through the salon methodically, following the original plans to ensure every detail was correct. The navigation stations, instruments needed cleaning and calibration. The chart table's leather inlay required careful restoration. Even the hidden liquor cabinet, which Sarah declared a grown-up secret spot, was restored to its former glory, its crystal decanters sparkling in the afternoon light. But it was the small details that touched Marcus most deeply. The height marks they discovered weren't the only traces of Catherine's childhood aboard. There were initials carved discreetly under the chart table, a collection of shells still arranged on a windowsill, and a tiny brass dolphin figure mounted beside her childhood bunk that had clearly been rubbed for luck thousands of times. "Can we make it exactly like it was?" Sarah asked, holding up a faded photograph of the salon in its prime. "So when Catherine comes back, it'll be like coming home." Marcus studied the photograph, noting how even the throw pillows had been arranged with care. "We'll make it even better," he promised, "because now it'll have old memories and new ones, too." They worked until dusk, their efforts transforming the salon into a warm, welcoming space. Sarah had arranged her cleaning supplies in a neat cabinet, adding her own small touch to the boat's history. "I put them here," she explained, "so they'll be ready when Catherine wants to take care of her boat again." As they prepared to leave for the day, Marcus noticed Sarah standing in the salon doorway, looking back at their work. The setting sun painted the space in amber light, making the restored wood glow like honey. "What are you thinking, sweetheart?" She considered for a moment, her expression serious. "I'm thinking that love doesn't go away just because you put it in a boat and try to forget it. It just waits until you're ready to remember." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "From the mouths of babes," his father would have said. "You're right," he managed. "Love has a way of finding its way home." They secured the yacht for the night, but not before Sarah placed a small origami boat she'd made on the chart table. "A welcome home present," she explained, "for when Catherine's ready." The marina was quiet as they walked down the dock, but Marcus could have sworn he heard music from the yacht salon, perhaps just the wind in the rigging, or perhaps the sound of memories coming back to life, one restored treasure at a time. The click of expensive heels on the dock was Marcus's first warning. He was in the engine room, testing the newly restored fuel system, when he heard footsteps too precise to belong to any of the regular marina crowd. Setting down his wrench, He emerged into the autumn morning to find a woman in a tailored suit standing at the yacht's helm, her expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Mr. Sullivan," she consulted a leather portfolio. "I'm Victoria Chen, Ms. Thompson's personal assistant. We need to discuss your unauthorized work on this vessel." Marcus wiped his hands on a shop rag, studying her carefully. Despite her professional demeanor, there was something in her eyes when she looked around the yacht, recognition, perhaps even approval of the changes. "Would you like a tour?" he offered, gesturing to the gleaming brightwork and freshly cleaned deck. "I keep detailed logs of all the work." Victoria hesitated, then nodded. Ms. Thompson would want to know exactly what's been done to her father's boat. They started with the deck, where Marcus explained each restoration choice, each repair decision. Victoria took meticulous notes, but he noticed how her professional facade softened when she saw Sarah's careful organization of cleaning supplies, each bottle labeled in childish handwriting. "You've been doing this work with your daughter?" she asked, pausing at the ship's bell where the sparrows had nested. Sarah's 8, about the same age Catherine was when she started learning about boats from her father. Marcus watched Victoria's reaction carefully. "We found the height marks in the engine room." Something flickered across Victoria's face. "I've worked for Ms. Thompson for 6 years. She's never once mentioned those marks." They moved below deck, where the restored salon drew an audible gasp from Victoria. The afternoon sun streamed through spotless windows, catching the polished compass rose in the table, illuminating the carefully preserved photos on the walls. "We found her father's poetry book," Marcus said quietly, indicating the silver-embossed volume on the shelf, "and the secret compartment with her childhood treasures. We cleaned everything, but left it exactly as it was." Victoria ran her hand along the chart table, where Sarah's origami boat still sat like a patient message in a bottle. "You have to understand," she said finally. "Ms. Thompson hasn't set foot on this yacht since the accident. When the lawyers said someone was working on it without authorization, I couldn't let her sink," Marcus interrupted, leading the way to the engine room. "Not when I knew I could fix what went wrong." The restored Rolls-Royce diesel gleamed in the work lights, its brass and copper fittings glowing like new. Marcus pointed out the modifications he'd made, the safety improvements that would prevent the kind of catastrophic failure that had claimed James Thompson's life. "Here," he said, showing her the hairline crack he'd discovered and repaired. "This is what happened that day. Water intrusion into the timing case. He probably never saw it coming." Victoria's professional mask cracked slightly. "She blamed herself, you know, for not being there, for not checking the engine herself. She used to be the one who—" She caught herself, straightening her jacket. "That's not relevant to our current situation." Marcus pulled out his logbook, showing her the detailed documentation of every repair, every decision. "I'm not asking for payment," he said quietly. "I just couldn't walk past every day and watch her fade away. Some things deserve to be saved." Victoria studied him for a long moment. "You sound like him. James Thompson used to say something similar. About old boats." "Smart man, yes." She closed her portfolio slowly. "Mr. Sullivan, officially I'm here to serve you with a notice to cease and desist all work on this vessel." She paused, looking around the engine room. "Unofficially, how long until she's ready to sail?" Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. "The Major, systems are restored. A week of fine-tuning, maybe 2. Sarah's got a schedule drawn up for the final touches." Victoria nodded, her decision made. "I'll hold off filing the paperwork. But Mr. Sullivan?" She turned at the companionway. "Don't give her reason to regret this trust." "I wouldn't know how," he answered honestly. After she left, Marcus sat in the salon, watching the play of light on the restored woodwork. From somewhere above came the gentle sound of sparrows returning to their nest, making themselves at home, just as he and Sarah had done. He thought about Catherine Thompson, wondering if she was ready to face the memories they'd so carefully preserved. Sometimes healing had to happen in stages, first the mechanical repairs, then the deeper restoration of the heart. Taking out his logbook, he made a final entry for the day. Official inspection complete, authorization pending. She's almost ready to come home. Outside, the afternoon light turned the harbor to gold, and Marcus could have sworn he heard the engine purr contentedly like a patient who finally sees recovery on the horizon. The weather alert came through just before noon, a nor'easter spinning up the coast, stronger than expected. Marcus stood at the marina office's weather station, watching the pressure drop on the barometer his father had mounted there 20 years ago. The old brass needle was falling faster than he'd seen in years. Latest updates calling for 60-knot gusts, Mary Chen said, hanging up the marine radio. They're evacuating the outer marina. Harbour Master wants all hands on deck. Through the office window, Marcus could see Catherine's dream rocking gently at her berth. 3 weeks of restoration had transformed her from a neglected ghost to a living vessel again. The thought of a storm undoing all that work made his stomach tight. Sarah burst through the door, still wearing her school backpack. "Daddy, Mrs. Peterson says there's a big storm coming." Her eyes were wide with concern. "What about Catherine's boat?" "Don't worry, sweetheart. I've already called Mrs. Martinez next door. You'll stay with her tonight while I—" "But Daddy, all our work, the sparrow's nest, and Catherine's special things." Sarah's voice caught. "We have to protect them." Marcus knelt to her level, seeing the same fierce protectiveness he felt reflected in her eyes. "That's exactly what I'm going to do. But I need you safe at home, okay?" The VHF radio crackled with another update. The storm had intensified, its track shifting closer to the coast. Around the marina, the usual afternoon calm had given way to urgent activity as boat owners secured their vessels or moved them to safer harbors. Old Joe Fletcher appeared in the doorway, rain gear already on. "Need help moving her up the river, Marcus. Got space at my mooring." Marcus shook his head, checking the yacht's lines through the window. "She's too deep for the river channel. Better to ride it out here." He didn't add that the thought of moving, Catherine's dream now, just when she was healing, felt wrong somehow. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus and Sarah worked together, securing everything aboard that could move, doubling up lines, checking the new bilge pumps. The brass bell that had become home to the sparrows was carefully wrapped in canvas, protecting both the metal and the nest above it. "Found this in the forward cabin," Sarah said, holding up a leather case. Inside was a set of signal flags, their colors still bright despite their age. At the bottom of the case was a handwritten note, "For Katie, because every captain needs to know how to call for help. Love, Dad." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. This wasn't just about protecting a boat anymore. It was about preserving the pieces of a relationship that needed a chance to heal. The sky darkened prematurely as the storm's leading edges reached them. Wind-driven rain pelted the windows, and the barometer continued its ominous drop. In the harbor, smaller boats were already pitching in the building seas. "Time to get you to Mrs. Martinez's," Marcus said, helping Sarah pack her overnight bag. She moved slowly, reluctantly, casting worried glances at the yacht. "Promise you'll take care of her?" Sarah asked, clutching her logbook. All by herself, she might get scared of the storm. Marcus hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo and boat polish. "I promise, and tomorrow you can help me check every inch to make sure she's okay." After dropping Sarah off, Marcus returned to Catherine's dream. The wind was really picking up now, howling through the rigging of the surrounding boats. He made one final deck check, securing the last pieces of equipment, then went below to start his vigil. In the salon, the brass lamps swayed gently, casting moving shadows on the photographs they'd so carefully restored. James Thompson smiled. From one of them, standing proud at the helm in heavy weather gear, the image strengthened Marcus's resolve. This boat had survived storms before. She would survive this one. The first serious gusts hit just after sunset, heeling the yacht enough to make the cabinets creak. Marcus moved through the boat methodically, checking bilges, monitoring the electric systems, adjusting lines as needed. The engine he'd restored purred steadily, keeping the batteries charged for the bilge pumps. In the main cabin, something caught his eye. A small leather diary had worked loose from a shelf, fallen open to an entry written in Catherine's flowing hand. "Out here, when the storm winds blow, Dad says the boat tells us what she needs. We just have to listen with our hearts as well as our ears." Marcus picked up the diary carefully, returning it to its place. "I'm listening," he whispered to the yacht, to the ghosts of the father and daughter who had once found shelter in these same cabinets, rode out storms in these same waters. "I'm right here." Outside, the nor'easter raged, but inside Catherine's dream, Marcus settled in for a long night of standing watch, knowing that sometimes the most important repairs happened in the dark and storm, when everything that mattered was at stake. The nor'easter hit its full fury just after midnight. Catherine's dream pitched and rolled against her lines, each wave sending shudders through her hull that Marcus felt in his bones. The wind screamed through the rigging like a banshee, and the rain drummed against the deck with machine gun intensity. In the salon, Marcus had created a kind of command center, flashlights, tools, and emergency supplies laid out with military precision. The brass lamps swayed wildly, their light dancing across the photographs on the walls. In one, a teenage Catherine stood at the helm in similar conditions, her father's steady hand on her shoulder as they faced down a storm together. The first real challenge came at 2 a.m. A massive gust heeled the yacht hard to port, and Marcus heard the distinctive sound of a dock line starting to part. He was on deck in seconds, rain stinging his face as he worked to replace the straining line. The wind tried to tear the replacement rope from his hands, but his father's voice echoed in his memory. "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast." The new line secured, Marcus allowed himself a moment to survey the marina. Most of the smaller boats had been evacuated, leaving the larger vessels to battle the storm alone. Through the driving rain, he could see the marina's breakwater nearly submerged under massive waves. Back below, he made another round of checks. The bilge pumps were handling the spray and rain, their steady thrumming a reassuring counterpoint to the storm's chaos. His restored engine continued its faithful service, maintaining power to essential systems. A tremendous crash from on deck sent him racing up the companionway. A flying piece of debris, someone's loose deck chair, had knocked over the carefully wrapped ship's bell. Marcus fought his way forward, securing the bell and checking on the sparrow's nest above it. Somehow, protected by the canvas and the yacht's sturdy radar arch, the nest had held. "Your father would be proud," he said aloud, though the wind tore the words away. "She's holding strong, Catherine. She remembers how to dance with the storm." Around 3 a.m., the barometer finally stopped falling. The worst was directly overhead now, with visibility reduced to nearly nothing in the driving rain. Marcus stayed in the salon, monitoring, adjusting, listening to every sound the yacht made. Years of experience had taught him the difference between normal storm noises and the warning sounds of potential trouble. A particularly violent gust sent something crashing in the main cabin. Marcus found Catherine's childhood violin case had broken free from its mounting. As he secured it again, a piece of paper fluttered out. Sheet music for La Mer, covered in penciled notes in James Thompson's handwriting. Katie's first sea song, practiced during that big storm off Block Island. The discovery sparked a memory of Sarah practicing her own music, not violin, but a toy keyboard she'd saved up for, determined to learn sea shanties for their weekend work sessions. The parallels between past and present struck him again as he carefully tucked the sheet music away. Near dawn, a new sound caught his attention, a change in the engine note. Marcus was in the engine room instantly, his hands and ears telling him what his eyes couldn't see in the dim light. The raw water intake was straining, possibly clogged with storm debris. This was the kind of problem that had claimed James Thompson's life, a small issue that could cascade into catastrophe if not caught in time. But Marcus had prepared for this, had added extra filters and monitoring systems during the restoration. Working quickly but carefully, he cleared the intake and adjusted the flow. "Not this time," he murmured, patting the engine housing. "Not on my watch." The sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly around 6 a.m., though the storm's fury hadn't slackened much. Marcus took advantage of the growing light to make another deck check. The yacht's lines had held, his careful preparations paying off through the night's battle. In the growing dawn, he could see the storm's impact on the marina. Several boats had broken free, though thankfully the harbor patrol had corralled them before they could do much damage. But Catherine's dream had remained steady, protected by both physical preparations and something less tangible, as if the spirit of the boat itself had remembered its strength. Making his way back to the salon, exhausted but satisfied, Marcus noticed something extraordinary. The morning light, filtering through rain-streaked windows, caught the compass rose inlaid in the dining table. For a moment, it seemed to glow from within, pointing true north despite the chaos outside. He thought of Sarah, probably awake already, at Mrs. Martinez's house, worried about their boat. He thought of Catherine, wherever she was, perhaps also awake, perhaps feeling some distant connection to this vessel that had weathered so many storms with her family. Marcus pulled out his logbook, its pages illuminated by one of the gently swaying brass lamps. His entry was simple but heartfelt. Nor'easter came with full force. Catherine's dream proved herself seaworthy in every way. Some boats are built just to float, but others are built to carry our hearts through any storm. This one has never forgotten how. Outside, the wind began to ease slightly, the sky lightening to pearl grey. Catherine's dream rode the waves with the grace of a dancer, secure in her lines, protecting the memories and treasures she carried. Marcus smiled, bone-tired but deeply content. The night had tested them both, and they had proved equal to the challenge. Like so many things in life, sometimes the hardest storms showed us exactly what we were capable of surviving, and what was worth protecting at all costs. The morning after the storm dawned impossibly clear, as if the nor'easter had scrubbed every particle of dust from the air. Marcus and Sarah stood on Catherine's dream's deck, completing their post-storm inspection. The yacht had emerged virtually, unscathed, her newly restored surfaces gleaming in the autumn sunlight. "Even the sparrows came back," Sarah exclaimed, pointing to where the small family had returned to their nest above the ship's bell. They knew she'd keep them safe. Marcus was checking the last of the dock lines when he heard it, the distinctive thrum of helicopter blades approaching from the north. He straightened, shading his eyes against the morning sun. The sound was getting closer, more purposeful than the usual harbor traffic. "Daddy, look!" Sarah pointed toward the marina's rarely used helipad. A sleek black helicopter was descending, its downdraft creating patterns on the harbor's surface. The corporate logo on its tail was instantly recognizable: Thompson Maritime Industries. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. After 3 weeks of restoration work, after the night of battling the storm, after all the discoveries and careful preservation of memories, the moment of truth had arrived with no warning. "Sarah, honey, run get my logbook from the salon." He wanted to buy a moment to compose himself, to prepare for whatever came next. The helicopter's blades slowed to a stop, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened and a woman emerged. Even at a distance, even after 5 years, there was no mistaking Catherine Thompson. She moved with the same grace, captured in the photographs they'd restored. Though her stride now held a CEO's authority, she paused at the edge of the dock, staring at her father's yacht. Marcus couldn't see her expression, but he noticed her hands clench at her sides. For a heartbeat, he thought she might turn back. Sarah returned with the logbook, pressing it into his hands. "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered. "The boat's ready, she just needs to remember." Catherine began walking down the dock, her heels clicking against the wooden planks. She was dressed in business attire, charcoal suit, cream silk blouse. But Marcus noticed she wore the same style of watchband he'd seen in her childhood photos. Some habits, it seemed, remained ingrained. She stopped a few feet from the yacht's bow, her eyes taking in every detail of the restoration. Marcus held his breath, watching her catalogue the changes, the gleaming brightwork, the restored teak, the carefully preserved original features. "Mr. Sullivan," her voice was controlled, professional, but he caught the slight tremor beneath it. "My assistant told me what you've done here. Would you like to come aboard?" he offered quietly. "There are some things you should see." Catherine hesitated, and in that moment, Marcus saw not the powerful CEO, but the girl from the photographs, the one who had once known every inch of this boat, who had learned about life and love and loss within these hull plates. "I know about the engine," she said finally. "About the crack you found, the modification you made to prevent—" She took a breath. "To prevent what happened to my father. That's not all we found." Sarah spoke up suddenly, stepping forward with the direct courage of childhood. "We found your special things too. We kept them safe during the storm." Catherine's composure wavered slightly. "My special things?" "The secret compartment in the salon ceiling," Sarah continued earnestly, "with your dolphin and your shells and your violin music. We made sure it didn't get wet when the big waves came." Something shifted in Catherine's expression. Surprise, vulnerability, a crack in the careful walls she'd built. She looked at Sarah more closely. "You helped with the restoration." "Sarah's been my partner in this from the start," Marcus said softly. "She has her own logbook, just like you used to keep." Catherine's eyes moved to the sparrow's nest above the ship's bell, to the freshly oiled teak, to all the small details they'd restored with such care. "During the storm," she said slowly, "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about— I knew she was out here, facing it alone." "Not alone," Marcus corrected gently. "Never alone." A ray of sunlight caught the compass rose inlaid in the deck, the same, one that had guided them through the night. Catherine took a step forward, then another, her hand reaching out to touch the familiar brass rail. "I had a call from the harbour master this morning," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said out of all the boats in the marina, she didn't so much as scratch her paint. Said whoever was taking care of her must have loved her almost as much as—" She stopped, emotion finally breaking through. Sarah moved closer, offering Catherine her own logbook. "Would you like to see? We wrote down everything, just like your dad taught you to do." Catherine took the notebook with trembling hands, and as she opened it, Marcus saw the businesswoman fall away completely. In her place stood the daughter, the sailor, the girl who had once known every sound this boat could make. "Welcome home," he said quietly, and meant it with all his heart. The morning light streamed over them, catching the brass and the wood and the tears that Catherine was no longer trying to hide. Somewhere above, the sparrows sang their morning song. Blessing. The moment when past and present finally flowed together like tides returning to shore. The salon of Catherine's dream held its breath as Catherine moved through it, her fingers trailing along surfaces she hadn't touched in 5 years. She paused at the chart table, where her father's logbook still lay precisely arranged there, leather covers restored to a warm gleam. You kept everything, she said softly, opening the most recent volume. Even his notes about the engine problems. Marcus stood near the companionway, giving her space while staying close enough to answer questions. Sarah had reluctantly gone to school, but not before extracting a promise from Catherine to still be here when she returned. I thought they might be important, he said, both for the repairs and other reasons. Catherine's fingers found the last entry, the one before that fatal voyage. He knew something was wrong. I told him to wait, to let the Yard handle it, but he was always so sure he could fix anything. She closed the book carefully. I was in London when it happened. Contract negotiations. He called about the engine, but I was too busy to really listen. Catherine. Marcus spoke her name gently, breaking protocol. The crack we found, it was hidden. Even with modern equipment, it was hard to detect. Your father couldn't have known. She turned to face him, and he saw the weight of 5 years of guilt in her eyes. But I knew these engines. He taught me everything about them. If I'd been here... Then 2 people might have been lost that day, Marcus said quietly. Sometimes being absent is what keeps us here for the healing. Catherine sank into the captain's chair, the one where her father had taught her to plot courses and read weather maps. After the accident, everyone wanted me to sell her. Too many memories, they said. Not good for moving forward. She gestured around the salon. But every time I thought about it, I'd remember him saying that boats aren't just vessels for our bodies. They're keepers of our hearts. Marcus nodded, thinking of his own father's teachings, living on through his work. That's why we restored her exactly as she was. Sarah said the memories needed a home to come back to. Your daughter. Catherine smiled slightly. She reminds me of someone. I saw it in the photographs, Marcus admitted. The way she helps with repairs, keeps her logbook. Some things pass down through more than just blood. Catherine stood, moving to the small cabinet where they'd preserved her childhood treasures. I used to hide little notes in here, secrets, wishes, things I was afraid to say out loud. Dad pretended not to know about it, but every now and then I'd find a chocolate bar or a new shell tucked inside. She opened the cabinet, and her breath caught at the sight of the worn fabric dolphin. Mr. Finn's, she whispered. I thought he was lost in the clean-up after... Sarah insisted we clean around him, not move him. She said he was standing watch. Catherine clutched the dolphin gently. The night Dad disappeared, the Coast Guard called me in London. I flew back immediately, spent days searching, when they found the yacht drifting with the engine seized. She took a shaky breath. I couldn't face it. Couldn't face him not being here to show me how to fix what was broken. Marcus moved closer, drawn by the raw honesty of her words. My father used to say that broken things aren't failures, they're opportunities to prove love is stronger than damage. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, like yours. Marcus hesitated, then continued. The night of the storm, when I was checking the engine, I found something you should see. He led her to the engine room, where his repairs had transformed the space from a memorial to a living system. Catherine's eyes went immediately to the modifications he'd made, her trained gaze assessing and appreciating the work. Here, he said, pointing to the repaired crack. Your father's last log entry mentioned checking the timing. He was right. There was a problem, but it wasn't something he could have fixed alone. The flaw was in the original casting, hidden since the boat was built. Catherine studied the repair, her engineer's mind engaging despite her emotion. You modified the whole system, added a pressure release and monitoring points. She'll never fail the same way again. Their eyes met in the confined space, understanding flowing between them. They were standing where both their fathers had stood, carrying on a legacy of caring for things that carried hearts. When did you know, she asked, that this was more than just a repair job? Marcus thought about Sarah's first day aboard, about discovering the height marks and childhood treasures, about standing watch through the storm. "I think the boat told us, we just had to listen." Catherine smiled, really smiled, for the first time since her arrival. Dad always said that too. Listen to her, Katie. Boats speak to those who love them. The engine room hummed softly around them, the sound of systems restored and running true. Through the portholes, autumn sunlight painted patterns on the gleaming machinery, making the brass and copper glow like precious metals. "Thank you," Catherine said simply, not just for fixing her, but for... She gestured to the carefully preserved traces of her past, the protected memories, the restored heart of her father's legacy. "She was waiting for you," Marcus replied. "We just kept her company until you were ready to come home." Above them, the sparrows called their afternoon song, their nest safe in the embrace of a boat that had weathered storms both physical and emotional. Some things, once loved, never stopped offering shelter to hearts that needed to heal. Sarah burst onto the deck of Catherine's dream like a small whirlwind, her backpack still on, her eyes bright with after-school excitement. She stopped short at the sight of Catherine still aboard, now dressed more casually in borrowed deck shoes, and a merino sweater that Marcus had kept in the yacht's lockers. "You stayed!" Sarah's smile could have lit up the harbour. "Did you see your secret compartment? Did you find Mr. Finn's? Did Daddy show you how we fixed the engine?" Catherine, who had spent the day reviewing logbooks and running her hands over familiar surfaces, found herself smiling back. "I did. And I heard you were the one who made sure all my old treasures were kept safe." "Want to see my treasure spot?" Sarah asked, already moving toward the main cabin. "Daddy helped me make one just like yours, but on the other side, so we didn't disturb your special place." Marcus watched from the companionway as his daughter led Catherine below deck, their dark heads bent together like conspirators. Sarah's voice drifted back up. "And this is where I keep my boat hospital helper notes and my special tools that Grandpa gave me." The afternoon light streamed through the yacht's portholes as the two explored Sarah's carefully organized workspace. Catherine listened intently as Sarah explained her cleaning system, her methodical approach to restoration so similar to the ones documented in the old photographs. "You know," Catherine said, examining Sarah's logbook, "I used to color-code my notes just like this. Red for urgent repairs, blue for routine maintenance. That's what I do too," Sarah exclaimed. "And green is for things that are all fixed and happy again." They emerged on deck just as Mary Chen appeared on the dock with a basket covered in a red checked cloth. "Thought you might be hungry," she called up. "Can't restore boats on empty stomachs." Soon they were settled in the salon, sharing Mary's still warm cinnamon rolls. Sarah had arranged everything on the fold-out table with careful precision, using the yacht's original china that they'd cleaned and preserved. "Daddy says boats aren't just for sailing," Sarah announced, carefully pouring hot chocolate from a thermos. "They're for making memories, too." Catherine's hand trembled slightly as she accepted a cup. "My father used to say something very similar." "No," Sarah said simply. "We read it in his captain's log. That's why we made sure to save all the memory parts while we were fixing the boat parts." Marcus watched Catherine's expression soften as Sarah showed her the careful notes she'd kept. About each discovered treasure, the violin music, the shell collection, the height marks. His daughter had an instinctive understanding of how to bridge the gap between past and present. "Would you like to see how the engine works now?" Sarah asked. "Daddy made it extra safe, with special lights that tell you if anything's wrong, like a doctor's checkup machine." Catherine glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Together, they followed Sarah to the engine room, where she proudly demonstrated the monitoring systems, her small hands pointing out each improvement with surprising technical accuracy. "And see this part?" Sarah indicated the repaired crack. "This is where she was hurting before, but Daddy fixed it so it can never break the same way again. We check it every day just to make sure she knows we're paying attention." Catherine's eyes met Marcus's over Sarah's head, understanding flowing between them. Out of the mouth of babes came the deepest truths about healing, about attention, about love. "You know," Catherine said softly, "I learned about engines right here, just like this. My father would explain every part, every system. He said, that boats talk to us if we listen," Sarah finished. "Daddy says that too. Is it because boats are magic?" "No," Catherine smiled, running her hand along the gleaming engine housing. "It's because they hold our hearts." They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the yacht together, Sarah showing Catherine all the special touches they'd added during the restoration. At each spot, Catherine shared a memory, teaching herself to play violin during long passages, helping her father change the oil, falling asleep in the salon while he charted their next adventure. As the sun began to set, they gathered on deck, watching the harbor lights begin to twinkle on. Sarah had brought out her own small toolkit, proudly showing Catherine each carefully maintained piece. "This was my grandpa's," she explained, holding up a brass wrench. "Daddy says tools remember all the love they've helped fix things with." Catherine touched her father's old logbook in her lap. "I think they do, just like boats remember all the people who've loved them." Sarah leaned against the rail, looking out at the harbor with the contentment of someone exactly where they belonged. "Catherine," she asked, her voice thoughtful, "now that you're home, will you teach me boat things too, like your daddy taught you?" Marcus started to intervene, not wanting Sarah to presume too much, but Catherine's response came quick and natural. "I'd like that very much." She smiled at both of them. After all, every boat needs a good crew. The evening light painted the harbor gold, catching the brass and timber of Catherine's dream. Above them, the sparrows settled into their nest for the night, their soft chirping a gentle counterpoint to the sound of waves against the hull. In that moment, Marcus saw something extraordinary. 3 generations of boat love flowing together, past and present, meeting in the safe harbor of understanding. Sarah had done what all children do best, remind adults that love, once given, never truly goes away. It just waits in special compartments and engine rooms, in logbooks and treasured tools, ready to work its healing magic when the time is right. The autumn sunset painted Newport Harbor in shades of amber, and rose as Catherine led Marcus and Sarah to the yacht's forward cabin. She'd been aboard for 3 days now, slowly reclaiming her connection to the vessel that had shaped her childhood. But there was something different in her manner this evening, a mixture of nervousness and determination that reminded Marcus of approaching storms. "There's something I need to show you both," she said, kneeling beside a small safe built into the cabin's woodwork. The combination came to her fingers naturally. Her father's birthday, Marcus noticed, followed by what must have been her mother's. Inside lay a wooden box, its mahogany surface darkened with age and handling. Catherine lifted it with the reverence usually reserved for holy things. "Dad gave me this on my 16th birthday, right here in this cabin. He said it would make sense someday, when I found someone who understood that love isn't just about hearts, it's about hands that know how to fix what's broken." She opened the box carefully. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay an antique ring. The setting was platinum, classic and elegant, but what caught Marcus's eye was the unusual stone, a deep blue-green gem that seemed to hold the very color of the ocean in its depths. "It's called an Alexandrite," Catherine explained, her voice soft with memory. "Dad found it in a small shop in Gloucester. The owner said it came from a sailor who claimed it changed color with the tides. Mum wore it until she passed. Then Dad kept it in his stateroom." Sarah leaned closer, enchanted by the way the stone caught the light. "It looks like the water when we're fixing boats," she whispered. "That's what Dad said too." Catherine smiled at Sarah, then turned to Marcus with an intensity that made his heart skip. He told me to save it for someone who could teach me things about love that I didn't already know about the sea. Marcus felt the weight of the moment settle around them, like an incoming tide. "Catherine, let me finish," she said quietly, "because this isn't just about the ring. It's about what you and Sarah did here, not just fixing the boat, but understanding why it needed to be fixed. About knowing that sometimes the biggest repairs aren't the ones you can see." She stood, still holding the ring box, her professional poise softened by vulnerability. "3 days ago I flew here ready to serve you with legal papers. I thought I was protecting my father's legacy. Instead, I found you had preserved it in ways I never could. You didn't just restore his boat. You kept faith with his belief that broken things deserve second chances." Marcus watched as Catherine knelt again, this time in front of Sarah. "First, I need to ask you something very important. How would you feel about sharing your daddy and this boat and all the adventures we could have together?" Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. She looked at the ring, then at her father, then back at Catherine. A smile bloomed on her face like a sunrise. "Would you teach me all the secret boat things? And could we make more memory spots? And would the sparrows still be allowed to stay?" Catherine laughed, the sound rich with joy and unshed tears. "All of that and more. Because you taught me that love finds homes in the most unexpected harbors." She turned to Marcus, still kneeling, holding out the ring. "I know this is fast and maybe crazy, but Dad always said the sea doesn't give us time to hesitate. It gives us moments we have to be brave enough to take." Marcus looked at the ring, at his daughter's shining face, at this remarkable woman who had found her way home through storm and loss and love. He thought about fate and restoration, about how sometimes the things we fix end up fixing us. "The night of the storm," he said slowly, "I stood watch in your father's salon, surrounded by your childhood memories, and I realized something. Some boats, some people, some loves, they're worth waiting through any weather for." He reached out, not for the ring, but for Catherine's hand itself. "Yes," he said simply, "to all of it. To teaching Sarah, to sharing adventures, to proving that broken hearts, like broken boats, can be made stronger in the wounded places." Sarah's delighted squeal broke the moment's solemnity. She threw her arms around them both, creating a circle of embrace that felt like coming home. "Can we live on the boat? Can I have the cabin with the secret compartment? Can we—" "Slow down, sweetheart," Marcus laughed, but Catherine was already nodding. "Why not? She's big enough for a family." And besides, Catherine's eyes met Marcus's. With a mixture of mischief and tenderness, every good love story needs a boat to carry it. The ring slipped onto Marcus's finger as naturally as if it had been waiting for him all along. Through the cabin's windows, they could see the harbor lights beginning to twinkle on, each one a star come down to bless this moment of healing and hope. Above them, the sparrows called their evening song, secure in their nest above a ship's bell that had witnessed both storms and homecomings. In the distance, a foghorn sounded, not a warning this time, but a celebration, as if the sea itself was offering its ancient blessing to this union of hearts, hands, and horizons yet to be explored. The marina office looked different in the morning light, its worn furniture and faded photographs somehow more charming than shabby now. Catherine stood at the window, holding a stack of papers, and watching Marcus teach a group of local kids about boat safety on the dock. Sarah was there too, solemnly demonstrating the proper way to wear a life jacket. "Your father would have loved this," Mary Chen said, arranging fresh coffee and her signature cinnamon rolls on the office's small conference table. "James Thompson always said marinas should be more than just parking lots for boats," Catherine smiled, touching the Alexandrite ring that now caught the sunlight like captured waves. "Dad started as a dockhand, did you know that? He believed every great sailor began as a student of the sea. The door opened, bringing the sound of harbor activity and Marcus's familiar footsteps. The junior sailor program's got 10 new sign-ups, he announced. Tom Watson's offering to expand his teaching schedule to handle the overflow. Perfect timing, Catherine said, spreading the papers on the table. Because I have something to show you both. The documents were architectural drawings, beautifully rendered plans showing the marina transformed, but not into the luxury development many had feared. Instead, the designs showed an expanded working waterfront with educational facilities, a maritime trade school, and restored historic buildings. The Thompson Maritime Academy, Marcus read. From the header, his voice soft with understanding. Catherine, this is what Dad always wanted, she finished. A place where traditional maritime skills would be preserved, where young people could learn craftsmanship and seamanship. He had the plans drawn up years ago, but the board thought it wasn't profitable enough. Mary studied the drawings with glistening eyes. And now I own controlling interest in the company, Catherine said firmly, and I've learned that some investments can't be measured in quarterly returns. The plans showed the marina office transformed into a proper maritime center with classrooms and workshops. The working docks would be renovated but retain their character, with space for both commercial vessels and the pleasure craft that helped fund the operation. Look at this section. Marcus pointed to a detailed drawing. Traditional boat building, workshops, marine engine repair training, with a certain master mechanic as lead instructor. Catherine's eyes twinkled. If he's interested, of course. Marcus looked at her with wonder. You're not just preserving the marina. You're building a legacy. I'm protecting a way of life, she corrected. One that my father loved, that your father passed down to you, that we're teaching Sarah. Besides, she touched the ring again. I promised someone adventures, didn't I? The door burst open and Sarah rushed in, still wearing her junior instructor life jacket. Did you show him? Did you tell him about the special part? Catherine laughed. I was just getting to that. She pulled out another drawing, this one showing a beautiful workshop space with large windows overlooking the harbour. The sign in the illustration read, Sullivan and Daughter Marine Repair, Traditional Craftsmanship and Training. Marcus sat down, hard in the nearest chair. Catherine, the marina needs a proper repair facility, she said softly. One run by people who understand that every boat carries stories worth saving, and every child deserves a chance to learn at their parents' side, just like we did. Sarah was practically bouncing with excitement. Show him the school part, where we're going to teach kids about engines and stars and navigation and everything. The next drawing revealed classrooms named after legendary local mariners. James Thompson's name was there, alongside Marcus's father's, their legacies preserved, in a place where future generations would learn their craft. Mary wiped her eyes with her apron. I'd better go put on more coffee. Something tells me we're going to be here a while, planning this beautiful future. As Mary left, Catherine sat beside Marcus, taking his hand. I know it's a lot to take in, but watching you and Sarah these past weeks, seeing how you teach, how you understand both the mechanical and the human side of boats, this isn't just my dream anymore. It belongs to all of us. Marcus looked at the plans, at his daughters, shining face, at the woman who had brought new purpose to their lives. Your father once wrote that boats aren't just vessels for our bodies, they're keepers of our hearts. I think maybe marinas can be the same way. Is that a yes? Sarah asked anxiously. Can we build it? Can we teach everyone about boat love? Marcus pulled his daughter close with one arm, held Catherine's hand with the other. Yes to all of it, to building something that matters, to teaching what we love, to creating a place where stories and skills get passed down like precious heirlooms. Through the window, they could see Catherine's Dream moored at her dock, her brass gleaming in the sunlight. The sparrows darted around her rigging, free but always returning to their home above the ship's bell. Like them, this place was both an anchor and a launching point, a harbour for dreams ready to set sail. "When do we start?" Sarah asked, already pulling out her logbook to make plans. Catherine smiled, looking at her new family and the future they would build together. "We already have, sweetheart. Every repair, every lesson, every story we save, it's all part of the journey. And this is just the beginning." Outside, the harbour continued its eternal dance of departure and return, of boats setting out and coming. Home. But now each wave seemed to carry a promise of tomorrow, of traditions preserved and dreams renewed, of love building something strong enough to weather any storm. 1 year later, the autumn sunrise painted Newport Harbour in familiar shades of gold and rose, but the view from Catherine's Dream's deck was different now. The marina hummed with new energy, students heading to early morning navigation classes. The sound of work from the boat-building shed, the cheerful greetings of fishermen stopping by the expanded chandlery. Marcus stood at the helm, checking the instruments for their morning sail. Sarah had insisted on this tradition, taking the yacht out every Sunday, just as Catherine and her father had done years ago. Some traditions they'd learned were too precious not to continue. Engine room checks complete. Sarah's voice came through the intercom, properly formal despite her obvious excitement. At 9 years old, she took her position as junior engineer. Very seriously, especially on these family excursions. "Thank you, Engineer Sullivan," Marcus replied, matching her professional tone. From below came the sound of her delighted giggle, followed by Catherine's warm laughter. The past year had transformed them all. The Thompson Maritime Academy was thriving, with students from across the country coming to learn traditional maritime skills. The Sullivan and Daughter Marine Repair Shop had become legendary for its combination of technical expertise and respect for boats' histories. And Catherine had found a new way to honor her father's legacy, teaching advanced navigation, courses between her duties as CEO. "Look who's here!" Sarah called out, pointing toward the dock. Mary Chen approached with her traditional basket of breakfast treats, followed by a stream of familiar faces. Old Joe Fletcher, the Suarez brothers, Tom Watson, all carrying small packages. "You didn't think we'd forget, did you?" Mary called. "Up." 1 year ago today, this boat brought a family together. That calls for a celebration. They helped their friends aboard, setting up breakfast in the salon that had become the heart of their floating home. The table that had once held Catherine's childhood memories now collected new ones. Sarah's logbooks, Marcus's repair manuals, Catherine's navigation charts, all mingling together like tributary streams flowing into a river. "Remember the storm that started it all?" Joe asked, settling into his favorite spot by the window. "Never seen a boat come through weather like that looking better for it." "Some things get stronger in the broken places," Marcus said, his hand finding Catherine's. The Alexandrite ring caught the morning light, changing color like the sea itself. Sarah proudly showed off her latest project, a detailed model of Catherine's Dream she'd built in the Academy's workshop. "Look," she pointed out, "I even made a tiny sparrow's nest above the bell." The real sparrows, descendants of last year's family, still called the yacht home, their morning songs mixed with the sound of waves against the hull and the distant bellbuoy's steady rhythm. Catherine touched the brass dolphin figure that now hung in a place of honor by the helm. Mr. Finns had been promoted from his hiding spot to stand watch over their journeys. "Dad would have loved this," she said softly. "All of it. The academy, the students, the way we've kept the working waterfront alive." "He knows," Sarah said with a child's certainty. "The boat remembers for him." After breakfast, they prepared to sail. It was a perfect day for it, the wind fresh and fair, the harbour inviting them out to deeper waters. Their friends waved from the dock as Marcus guided the yacht smoothly from her berth. Sarah took her position at the chart table, clutching her junior navigator's compass. Catherine stood at the helm, her hands sure on the wheel that had first taught her about direction and purpose. Marcus moved between them, father and husband, teacher and student, all the roles flowing together as naturally as the tides. As they passed the breakwater, Catherine pointed to a small boat approaching the marina. "New student," she said. "See the way they're handling her? Raw talent just needs guidance." "Like someone else I once knew," Marcus smiled, remembering her story of learning at her father's side. Sarah looked up from her charts. "Can I help teach?" "Oh, them. About boat love and listening to engines and everything." "Of course," Catherine said. "That's what we do now. We keep the stories going, pass on what we've learned. Every boat that comes to us carries somebody's heart." The morning sun warmed the deck as Catherine's dream moved into open water. Behind them, the academy stood as a testament to dreams restored and promises kept. Before them stretched the horizon, full of possibilities. Marcus watched his wife and daughter work together at the helm, their dark heads bent over the compass, their faces lit with shared joy. The yacht moved surely beneath them, carrying not just their bodies, but their hearts, their hopes, their love. Some said it was just a boat, just a marina, just a school. But they knew better. It was a story of healing, of family found and restored, of love that could weather any storm. Like the sea itself, their journey had no end, just endless cycles of departure and return, of teaching and learning, of hearts finding their way home. Above them, the sparrows soared and wheeled, free but always returning to their nest above the ship's bell. Like them, this family had found their perfect harbor, a place where broken things were made whole, where stories were treasured, and where love, like the tide, renewed itself with each passing day. Catherine's dream sailed on into the morning, light, carrying her family toward whatever adventures waited beyond the horizon. But the best part, they all knew, would be coming home again, to their harbor, their academy, their floating home where every repair had become an act of love, and every journey began and ended in the safe harbor of each other's hearts.